we are here to have a very important conversation about criminal justice reform. And each of you in your respective states is doing something to change the conversation, to change the way we look at these things. I would love for each of you, and I know this is dangerous, asking such a broad question to 4 politicians, but I'm going to ask, and I'm going to start with you, Attorney General Nessel. But this question is for all of you to talk about what's worked in your state, and tell us about the results of your achievements. And if you could, I know you're all doing a lot, but if there's one particular thing you've done that you're most proud of, and that is most exemplary of what you're doing, and that can be transferred to the federal level, the national level, talk about that briefly. Okay, it's working.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I will talk about this one program that I really want to brag about. At the height of the pandemic, Governor Whitmer called me, and as an attorney general, this is a thrill whenever this happens. And she said, "What do you recommend we do to bring down some of the gun violence that we have? Do you have any programs in mind?" And as a very long time prosecutor and defense attorney, I was like, do I? Because just so you know, you have to get funded by the legislature and the governor for any programs you want as an AG. So we established a program called Job Court. And what it is it's a diversionary program. We try to focus on gun crimes that are nonviolent in nature. So before people graduate, when people are, a felon in possession of a firearm or carrying a concealed weapon, but before you graduate to assault with intent to murder or a homicide. And so we get people into programming with full wraparound services where they get job training, placement into a job in an area of their choice. Most of these are really good union jobs that have full benefits. And then if they have maintained employment successfully for 12 months, the case is dismissed. And we have so far a 0% recidivism rate. And we provide full wraparound services. So that means if a person is housing insecure, we find them housing. If they need childcare, we get them childcare. If they have transportation issues, we make sure that we get them transportation. And what we're finding is once, the most dangerous person on the street oftentimes is that person who's got nothing to lose. We want to give everyone something to lose. And that's a good paying job with benefits. And I'm thrilled we have the program going in Wayne County, where we have Detroit, in Genesee County, where we have Flint, and up in the Upper Peninsula, if I could make the signs with my hands when you guys know where that is. It's not part of Wisconsin. It is Michigan. So it's thriving in 3 counties. We want to expand it to all 83.
Attorney General Raoul. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snuff out your applause. Attorney General Raoul, talk about what's worked here in Illinois, and if there's one particular program you're most proud of, tell us.
Well, instead of a program, I'm going to tell you about a particular approach, because I'm sure my sister, Jahan Gordon Booth, has covered it all, because we partnered. I've spent 14 years in the legislature, and we partnered together on reform. I know Robert Rooks was recently left Reform Alliance, and he was with Alliance for Safety and Justice beforehand, and we've invested in trauma recovery centers. And I started my career out as a county prosecutor, and I was in juvenile court, where when I did background checks on the delinquency side, the criminal side, often I would find out that the young people had been in the building before as a victim of abuse and neglect in their own homes. So violence begets violence, and if we don't invest in the interruption where it grows out of, we're not going to take a real bite out of reducing the crime. So we've invested in intervention. The other thing about the approach, when I was head of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, people would come in and at any criminal justice reform suggestion say, what about the victims? And the thing that Robert Rooks, Seema here, and others did they empowered survivors of violence to be the voice of criminal justice reform, so that question could be overcome.
Governor Moore in Maryland, I think I know what you're going to say. Your your favorite program, but tell us what's worked in Maryland and the one thing you've done that you're most proud of in this area.
If you think I'm gonna talk about cannabis?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm very proud of that, but I'll actually and I can talk about that later on,
okay.
And why that was important. But actually, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is something called the Thrive Academy. This issue is a very personal issue for me. Just a little bit of background. I had handcuffs on my wrist by the time I was 11 years old. So how we think about our children, how we think about which children we're dismissing and which children we're giving opportunities to, this is something that is not just very important and personal. It was a core part of my why I decided to run for governor in the first place, because governors actually have a unique ability to be able to address these issues and to either make them better or make them worse. And the thing about a lot of violence that took place in our cities and in our state, where you took our state's largest city, Baltimore City, for example, when 8 straight years of 300 plus homicides. And a lot of the violence that we saw was retaliatory violence. So it was like, someone gets me, now my guy's gonna come get 3 of your people. And so you just watch this cycle continue back and forth. And oftentimes it was children that were getting wrapped up in this. And so we had enough information and data to be able to understand which kids had the highest probability of either being the victims of crime or the perpetrators of crime. We had that information. We just haven't acted on it. And so in our first year, we invested in this platform called the Thrive Academy, which essentially is working with community groups, working with violence interrupters, working with groups like the Safe Streets and all them in the world to be able to identify which kids did we think had the highest probability of being victims or perpetrators, and how do we wrap them with enough services and supports and their family members to make sure that they can make safely through a city, safely through a summer, safely through the year, etc. The reason that I'm really proud of this program is because it was done based on data and it works. And now from what we've seen in our first year and a half, for every single one of our children that are now involved in the Thrive program, not a single one has been the victim or the perpetrator of a homicide or a mass violent crime within our jurisdictions. In addition to that, now we have watched how Maryland has had the most precipitous drop in violent crimes and homicides of any state in the country. The last time the homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I wasn't born yet. And so if you can just focus on the things that work and actually use state resources to be able to help and to address that and support the programs and the people who are already on the ground doing the work, I think you have a better chance of getting the proper results you're looking for.
You know the question, Governor Shapiro. So in your in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, talk about the programs you've implemented, and if there's one in particular you're most proud of, talk about that.
First, I would just say it is really cool to be here with reform in this environment. It feels like just yesterday, my friend Michael Rubin called me after he walked out of a courtroom when Meek was taken away in handcuffs, angry as all hell, wanting to do something about it. And I just want to salute Michael and everybody else, Jessica and others, who made sure that they didn't just free Meek, but that they created a system that's going to free millions of people from a system that has been unjust for too long. And the fact that you are all here supporting it, listening to it, and taking these ideas back to your home states is really extraordinary. So I'm grateful you're all here, and thank you for giving us some attention. And obviously really cool to be here with the two generals and the governor. These are friends, and these are people doing meaningful work all across the country. I would say what I'm most proud of, and this kind of picks up on the thing that Jordan Harris and I were sort of joking about a little bit, is, I'm the only governor in the whole country with a divided legislature. I know y'all are laughing, but I'm going to get to a serious point. But in order to be able to get anything done in my state, you have to figure out a way to get Republican and Democratic votes. So think about what we've been able to do with Republican and Democratic votes. We passed the most sweeping criminal justice reforms in the history of Pennsylvania. We now have our records expunged when you get a pardon. And we've issued a record number of pardons over my time as Attorney General and now as governor. We are in a position now where we are investing, yes, in police in our communities to make our communities safer. And we've seen a rapid decline in violent crime in our communities. But importantly, those investments are being made in concert with investments in the community, lifting up the community, relying on church organizations, community organizations to help make sure our kids in particular are safe. We're seeing a really serious conversation between labor, the business community, Democrats and Republicans, who all understand that if folks are going to have the freedom to chart their own course and the opportunity to succeed in Pennsylvania, that also includes returning citizens, making sure they get back up on their feet. And so we're investing meaningful resources in that space as well. So there's a lot of good work that's happening. And I know y'all chuckle a little bit when I cited Jordan, but in a political environment that is as polarized as ours, we have made criminal justice reform an economic empowerment issue. We have made safe communities an issue that's not just about policing, but lifting up the community as well. And I'm proud of what we're building here in Pennsylvania. We got a long way to go and a lot of work to do, but what we have now is a foundation for progress that we've not had for quite a long time.
So you've all talked about something that has either earned applause, gotten head nods,
or some chuckles,
both,
apparently.
or some chuckles. You've got trauma recovery centers, the Thrive Academy, Job Court, expunging records, and yet there's what I want to know. How have you navigated the pushback, especially now in this presidential election season, where the Republican presidential nominee just yesterday is talking about police tactics from the past, wanting to bring back stop and frisk. How did each of you navigate this, and how should Democrats navigate this issue of criminal justice reform when there's the other party and other people might look at what you're doing as being quote unquote soft on crime or whatever racist way they're characterizing what you're doing? Jump ball. Go ahead, General Raoul.
Well, it's all about public safety. It's in the past, as I kind of alluded to at first, the counter argument was what about the victims? When you show the link of intervening in somebody's life before they commit a crime, and that it has a positive public safety result, then it's more difficult to criticize it. I'm involved in a move towards constitutional policing on the heels of the brutal murder of Laquan McDonald. Loretta Lynch initiated a patterns and practice investigation. My predecessor stepped in when Jeff Sessions stepped away, and I inherited, and we're in the midst of a long process, a consent decree implementation, moving the Chicago Police Department towards constitutional policing. In my tenure, I've had about 5 or 6 different police superintendents. Finally, we have one that is working collaboratively towards that goal because he knows it's in the interest, ultimately, of public safety and a better mental health for the officers as well. So if you make it, it's not choosing between pro-police and pro-reform. It's choosing both.
Good. Go ahead, Governor.
I think, and Josh, I think correctly touched on earlier, I think it's also, there's 2 things. I think, one, there's an economics argument that has to be framed out on this. And the second thing is, I think you got to go to the people on it. So for example, when I ran for governor in 2022, we won with more votes than anyone who'd ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland. We won with 61% of the vote. But the reason I bring it up is this. There was only one thing that beat me that year: cannabis. Cannabis won with 70% of the vote because cannabis was on the ballot. So I was like, yo, who is cannabis and why are they so popular? but what it was there was a referendum on our ballot to have cannabis legalized in the state of Maryland have a recreational cannabis market. So we have spent the past year being able to roll out what many people call the most equitable and fairest and safest recreational cannabis market in the country. There are 174 new cannabis licenses, all social equity licenses. So we're actually using it in a way to help to address the racial wealth gap as well. But importantly is this. I said from Jump Street, we cannot celebrate the benefits of legalization if you do not address the consequences of criminalization. That's right. If you don't address the fact that we have a new billion-dollar industry in the state of Maryland, but I still have people who can't get barber's licenses. I still have people who can't get student loans. I still have people who can't get government contracts because of a cannabis conviction, that they're being punished for something that's no longer illegal. And so we framed it up. This is about economics. This is about getting people back into economy. This is about addressing people like Shiloh, who I stood with a few months back, who told me that he got a new job, a job he was excited about, and got fired from that job on the second day because he couldn't pass a background check because of a misdemeanor cannabis conviction. And so a few months back, I ended up signing what is now the largest mass pardon for cannabis convictions in the history of the United States. I pardoned 175,000 cannabis convictions in the stroke of a pen. But the way that it was framed out, and so when we did it, we didn't just have Democrats there, we had Republican lawmakers stand with me in there, kind of celebrating the fact that I was signing this mass pardon, because for them, this was also about how can you get more people involved in the economy? How do you get more people engaged and working? And how do we make sure that every sentence does not have to be a life sentence? And so if you think you can frame it like that, both take it to the people and also frame it as an economic argument, I think you're going to be able to get people on both sides of the aisle who will stand up and say, I'm with that.
Let me pick up on what Wes said. First off, I think right after he signed that mass pardon, hopefully I was the first guy to text you to say I thought that was really incredible what you did. And hopefully I'll get the power from the legislature to do the same in Pennsylvania and follow Wes Moore's lead. What he did was really, really groundbreaking. When he talks about framing, here's another important frame. And this is something I've tried to introduce in Pennsylvania, that you can both make our community safer and reform an unjust criminal justice system at the same time. And the two are not connected in a negative way. Let me explain what I mean. If you give someone that pardon, it doesn't make our streets less safe. If you invest in giving someone a second chance, it doesn't mean that that kid can't walk to and from school safely. I think for too long, lazy politicians, particularly on the other side of the aisle, were trying to say that we can't do criminal justice reform because it makes us less safe. So we have spent a great deal of time trying to make sure that folks understand that is a false choice. And once we're able to decouple those conversations and say, yeah, you deserve a safe community to live in, but you also deserve a just system to be a part of or to be living within, then we're able to make some meaningful progress, Republicans and Democrats alike in Pennsylvania. So I think as we go forward, not just in our states, but all across the country, we all need to be strongly for safe communities and we need to be for just communities. And the two can coexist together.
Yes.
So we've got about did you want to jump in, General Nessel?
I did, I just in terms of when we go back to things that happened during the summer of 2020 and talk about, defunding the police or reforming the police. I think one of the things that we've tried to do in Michigan, and I've tried to lead by example in my department, is I truly believe that the best police officers are the officers that, first of all, have a career ahead of them. When we start taking away, pay and benefits, what happens is we're left off with worse police officers. But to me, the most important thing is the training, best practices. So what we did in my department, we got everybody accredited, it's a 2 to 3 year process, but it's, the very best policies when it comes to everything, right? Whether it's vehicle chases, whether it's foot pursuit, whether it's how to handle a situation where clearly somebody's having a mental health breakdown and they need a social worker more than they need somebody from law enforcement. And so we've worked really hard with that. And what you see with police departments that have gotten this accreditation, which again is not easy and it is expensive, but once they've gone through that, you see dramatically increase in the relationships that are formed between the police officers and the communities they serve. And you see a lot, fewer civil suits against the police department that are successful. And frankly, arrests go down, the number of officer-involved shootings decreases, and you just really have a better relationship between the community and the police officers. So I would say where I think that movement went wrong was that, again, it wasn't about taking money out of police departments. It was about making sure that they all had body cameras, right? It was about making sure that they had the very best training available. And it was making sure that they had programming where they were working directly with the community. And, I find that it's not that people don't want to have, public safety. People want to feel safe. It's just a matter of how are you really protecting the people that you serve as opposed to trespassing on their constitutional rights?
We have 2 minutes left in this conversation for this very big question that I was about to ask. But, Vice President Harris, she's accepting the nomination tonight. She will be officially the Democratic presidential nominee. She has lots of policy areas where we don't know where she is. On the issue of, as a presidential nominee, on the issue of criminal justice reform and everything we've been talking about here, what's the one thing you think she should have in her criminal justice policy platform that should be forthcoming? Governor Shapiro, you go first. And remember, we've got 90 seconds.
I'll just say real quick, she was an outstanding attorney general. In fact, when I took over as attorney general in Pennsylvania back in 2017, we modeled a lot of our initiatives off of the work that she did in California. I think if she brings that same balanced approach as president, that's what this country needs. People have a right to be safe and feel safe in their communities. Kamala Harris has always understood that. She's always understood that balance. And that's what I want to see from her. And I'm confident, given her life's work, she will do that. If past is prologue, then we're in for a president who's going to have a big heart and also not take any fuss from anybody.
I was like, wait, where is it going to say it? Governor Moore, is there anything specific you think the Harris-Walz agenda should have in it?
So, I agree with Josh. I am so excited about a President Kamala Harris and not plan on working every single day to make sure that we see that. The thing is, a lot of these things that we're talking about, they're not federal. They're state and local. And some of the biggest problems we have when it comes to our criminal justice system are what's happening in state capitals and what are happening in city halls. But if there is something that I want to see happen on the federal level, because we do not control that on the state level, they have got to fix these broken laws when it comes to cannabis. It has got to be something that we can have a federal conversation about how do you actually, we have 38 states right now, 38 states that have either decriminalized or completely legalized cannabis inside those states. But what we don't have is you don't have things like federal banking policies. So it doesn't make sense. And so if there's something that we can do that the federal government specifically can get done, we have got to have a more sensible policy when it comes to cannabis inside of this country, because only the feds are the ones who can control that.
Okay, real quickly, General Raoul, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, money. Seriously, your budget reflects your morals. There was a cut in VOCA funding that was being used for interventions within the states. I think here in Chicago, we have the business community finally investing in interventions, but we need the federal government to restore all the VOCA funding and go beyond that and invest in criminal justice reform.
And General Nessel, if you have anything to add real fast.
Yeah, well, a significant number of violent offenses, gun-related offenses, are committed with legal guns that should never be on the street in the first place. So whether you're talking about outlawing assault weapons or ghost guns, there are things that we can do to make sure that our communities are not so flooded with firearms, because in my opinion, that doesn't lead to anything very positive.
Right, so we're going to take this conversation out of the 38,000 foot level abstract, talking about policies, and put faces on it. And we've had two people who've just joined us after General Nessel. You will see immediately next to her is Ms. Cheryl Henderson, and next to her, I don't think I need to introduce him. Y'all know who he is. This is Yo Gotti. He's one of the country's most accomplished performers and committed activists who transformed his outrage into action, raising awareness everywhere he can, and even heading to the White House to push for change. And Ms. Henderson is a mother who endured unimaginable loss of her son, Shadarian, who was incarcerated at Parchman Prison in Mississippi on a non-criminal technical violation of parole, and took his own life after being there for 12 days, after being transferred there from another facility. I'm going to start with you, Yo Gotti, and talk to us about how did Parchman get on your radar, and what was it about that place that fired up your activism? Do you have a microphone, by the way?
I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and if you're from down that way, Mississippi is like kind of like our backyard. It's like if you cross one red light, you go from Memphis to Mississippi. So it's very close to us. I also, had friends that was locked up in that same, incarcerated in that same prison. So we know about it. We always hear about it. But this actually event took place. We started seeing like a lot of graphic content popping up online. And, to the point where you didn't know if it was real or fake. We just seeing like a lot of different things that was going around the internet. And I started sending it to Team Rock. And, have y'all seen this? And we was trying to see, was it real? And they was checking into it also. And once we realized that it was real, we just jumped right into it.
Can you be specific? What were you seeing that you were questioning whether it was real?
It was like, cells with a lot of blood in it, and I think cells on fire, and, a lot of...
Found out that, yes, those videos and things you saw were real. What did you do?
Like I said, I sent them to Team Rock because I know that, these type of causes, they fight all the time. So they were just disturbing videos, and I sent them to them and said, it's something we need to look into. And we got right on it.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Henderson, I gave a thumbnail of what happened to your son 3 years ago this month, August 1st. Shadarian was 27 years old, only in Parchman for 12 days. You and I were talking about this earlier. Just tell everyone about the phone call that you got from your son, but it wasn't a phone call, it was a FaceTime. Just tell that story.
Leading up.
Just hold it close to.
Okay, leading up to my son's unaliving, on that 12th day, he ended up calling me on another inmate's phone. It was a video call through Facebook. I received the call a little after 3 a.m. He didn't have the camera showing at first, and you could barely hear his voice. But by hearing his voice, me being a parent, me being his mother, he was in distress. He was crying. And I said, you know, what's going on? He eventually turned the camera around and he put his hand over his mouth. I could see the tears coming down his face. But when I looked closely at the video call, his face was deteriorating. He had bruises everywhere. T-shirt was slumped like off his shoulder. He didn't look like himself. He looked like he had lost maybe 40 pounds. He was like skin and bones. And when he put his hand over his mouth, he flipped the camera back around and you can see the inmates lying on the floor. His back was against the wall and he flipped the camera back around because I had started crying and he kept saying, he said, Mom, I need help. I'm not going to make it down here. And I said, what's going on? He flipped the camera around and he let me see inmates were everywhere on the floor, at least 7 of them. It was dirty, trashy, no mattress. And I'm like, is this your pod? This is where you're sleeping at? He flipped the camera around. He said, yes. I said, have you eaten? He said, no, Mom. They're refusing to give me my money on my canteen. And I don't know if I'm going to make it. And when he said that, he wanted to speak to everybody in the house. During that time, I had his 3 sons with me. My daughter sitting here, she prayed over him. She said, well, just hold on till tomorrow. We're going to help you. I said the same thing too. She got the phone back. She prayed for a second time. And every mother knows their child. And he said, Mom, I'm not going to make it, but this is what I want my siblings to do. I want them to finish high school, which they have. My daughter's in college. I have my younger set of twins. They're in the 12th grade. He said, because jail is not for any of them. He said, Mom, I don't supposed to be here. With murderers and rapists. Those are his exact words. He spoke to his children. His younger son said, Dad, when are you coming home? He said, I might not be coming home, but I always respect your mother and I always do what your mother tell you to do. And he kept calling back to back. He ran all the money out the phone. And that was it. I didn't hear from him no more until the chaplain called my house the very next day and said he had passed.
And what's so adding to the horror of this is that you didn't get that call from the chaplain until hours later.
Yes, it was after 6 p.m. when I got that call. And when I got the call, he said he passed about 3 o'clock. Okay. I called to Parchment Penitentiary. I spoke with Warden Munford, I think that's his name, and I spoke with several other people. They refused to give me any information, but then one person, I think he was, I can't remember what he was, but he said, well, your son passed at 1 o'clock. That's all we could tell you. And I said, well, the chaplain said he passed at 3. So which one was it? You know, they was refusing to give me any information. But
I'm sorry, Ms. Henderson, because I'm getting this.
Okay.
We are running out of time, but you've got 4, both of you, Yogati and Ms. Henderson, you've got 4 powerful people here. 2 governors, 2 attorneys general, and they have colleagues around the country. What's the one thing you want them to know, or the one thing you would love for them to do so that another mother doesn't have to go through what you've gone through?
I would love for them to understand the importance of Reform Alliance, because Reform Alliance is the voice for formerly incarcerated minority individuals who was failed systematically. I would want them to push to get other programs like Reform Alliance out there. And I appreciate Yogati. I appreciate Miss Jessica. I appreciate Rock Nation. I appreciate everyone basically in this room who has put me on their platform so I can tell my son's story, because I'm speaking through me, but it's pertaining to him. So that would be my goal for them to get other programs out.
And Yogati, I'm going to give you the last word here. These four powerful people and their colleagues, what should they know? What would you want them to do?
I think it's important that we get first systems, that for incarcerated people, that they get true rehabilitation. I have family members. A lot of my family members went to prison, came home. Some of them was really rehabilitated. So I think, if we can give first systems and make sure we treating everybody that's incarcerated like they still human beings, and make sure any programs, they can get educated, they can learn skills. I think, the goal should be, or the goal was based off what I heard, is that you're supposed to get rehabilitated, come back out to the world and be a better person.
Yo Gotti, Cheryl Henderson, AG Nessel, AG Raoul, Governor Moore, Governor Shapiro, thank you all very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.